Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930 and today I want to give you guys a review for the indie survival horror game The Forest. The Forest released on Steam through the Steam Greenlight program a couple years ago and at the time only had a single developer working on the project. For a single developer, this game was incredibly ambitious with deep survival mechanics and a full story built in. Since then, Enlight Studios was created, and The Forest has expanded upon its initial design, with tons of new features, including a large amount of buildings to build, secrets to find, and significantly improved visual performance. Today, The Forest feels significantly more polished, and is a deep survival experience that you'll want to play with the lights on. The Forest starts off with a cutscene showing the main character and his son traveling on a plane, and then suddenly crash landing on an uncharted island. Soon after waking up, the protagonist's son, Timmy, is kidnapped by an intimidating man covered in red body paint, which sets up the main goal of the game, finding your son. After passing out and waking up again, the player is given full control, and given very little information aside from some basic tutorials that pop up on screen. The game does very little to hold the player's hand throughout the experience, forcing players to experiment and survive through basic instinct. You're given a small plane axe along with some medicine and snacks to help get you started, but after you've exhausted these few resources from the plane crash, you're forced to live off the land. You'll need to find a source of food, water, and either find or build shelter. You'll find yourself hunting wild animals in the woods, cutting down trees, and even boiling water to help make it safe. All the systems are fully realized and make sense, and the game's survival booklet helps to explain your character's current status, notes, and other useful information very well. The game only gives you a few minutes of peace until you eventually begin to realize you're not alone in the forest. The Forest is also home to a large group of native cannibals that have some impressive artificial intelligence for an indie title. Cannibals will go on patrols, send scouts around, and even retreat and return later with backup if they feel they're losing a fight against you. They can climb trees, jump around, and flank you, and if you're not prepared, can easily overwhelm you. As a survival game, The Forest delivers an excellent experience that gives players the option to go from living in a twig and leaf tent to a massive reinforced fortress, depending on how much time they're willing to invest. But oddly enough, building cool shelters and surviving increasingly more difficult waves of cannibal attacks won't necessarily progress the game's story in any way. Your goal is to find Timmy, and the only way to do this is to venture into the game's many deep underground cave networks. And here's where the horror aspect comes into the game. Now, above ground, the game can be plenty scary, with cannibals just appearing off in the distance, staring you down, or sneaking around your campfire late at night and screaming off in the distance. But once you go down below ground and you're stuck navigating completely pitch black cave networks with only your butane lighter, you'll wish you were still fighting cannibals in the moonlight. The game delivers legitimate scares through a well-designed atmosphere, and playing on that instinctual fear of the unknown. There's no jump scares aside from some scripted bats that trigger in certain cave tunnels. The game's scariest moments come from the anticipation of something incredibly disturbing lurking in the shadows, and the numerous blurry photos that can be found scattered around the island do a great job in helping to build up that tension and foreshadow what's coming. The caves are well designed with unique layouts, disturbing decor, and tons of interconnecting paths that do their part in making sure new players get hopelessly lost. The caves not only house unseen horrors like cannibals and other monsters, but also valuable loot and resources that will be mandatory for finding Timmy. Items like the climbing axe, the rebreather, camcorder, and much more are hidden in multiple caves around the island, making it well worth braving the nightmares underground to find. Regardless of whether you plan on rescuing Timmy, or you just want to build some crazy beach house with zip lines and border walls. The game world isn't as large as most modern open world games, but dense enough to feel like a real place. Each area is loaded with resources like trees to cut down, bushes to harvest, and even wild animals roaming around. Using the inventory, you can craft tools by combining items in believable ways. Want a bow to shoot arrows? Tie some cloth together to make a rope and then attach the rope to a stick. Want to stick a flashlight on that? Well, just tape it down with duct tape. The only downside to the crafting menu is that it's a little awkward to control. You need to right-click on items in your inventory to set them in the center mat, and if you have exactly the right amount of each ingredient for a preset tool, the gear icon in the center will turn solid and allow you to craft the item. If you mistakenly add too many items like an extra cost to the ingredients, then the gear icon will disappear, forcing you to move everything off of the mat and start over. There should also be a section in the survival booklet that details how to craft all the items, or at least takes note of all the recipes already discovered by the player. As for building structures, this is designed very well and very easy to do. Simply choose from the many different structures in the survival booklet, all categorized for easier navigation, and place the blueprints where you want to build. Once it's placed, the game will tell you how many resources are required to finish the structure, and generally it's pretty easy to find whatever you need just roaming around the forest. But a lot of the larger structures require an insane amount of resources, which can take a long time depending on the tools at your disposal. Some structures require 80-some logs, and considering each tree in the world forms about 4 logs, you're going to be stuck cutting down a ton of trees, something that will only get more difficult as you get attacked by cannibal patrols that hear all the noise that you're making. There's no real point in wasting time building structures aside from necessities like fires or temporary structures to save your game. But this is a survival game at its core, so if you're interested in that aspect of the game, The Forest delivers plenty of opportunities for wave-based defensive gameplay. If you don't feel like dealing with building huge structures and exploring dark, terrifying caves alone, you can invite your friends for up to 8-player cooperative play. When the game first released in early access, the designer was confident that this game would never feature cooperative play. But here we are several years later, and the cooperative option in The Forest makes the experience significantly more enjoyable. You'll go from running around aimlessly together trying to understand the game's basic mechanics to building an entire logging company with intricate zipline systems to transport logs to each other and storage facilities for excess food and resources. All of the single player's mechanics are present in cooperative mode, and you can even search for teaming together if you want. The game's difficulty doesn't seem to scale very well. I found it a bit too easy to stay alive, especially considering you can be revived an infinite amount of times, regardless of how you ended up dying. Once you complete the game's story, there's not really much else to do aside from continuing to pointlessly build structures outside. It'd be nice if the developers continued to add to the world of The Forest, with more caves to explore and new enemy types to encounter while you build your dream base. But considering the game finally came out of early access with this full release, it's likely that the game is not going to see any more significant changes. In terms of visual quality, The Forest is kind of a mixed bag. The level of detail in the game environment is great, with beautifully realized foliage, excellent sound design, and lots of dynamic objects. But the game's baked lighting looks really outdated, and some objects and textures just don't look as good as they could. Thankfully, the performance has been ironed out significantly since the game's original release, but I think the game's overall visual aesthetic has been downgraded substantially from its initial reveal and release. The player animations are really outdated, with stiff, awkward melee combat and inconsistent hit registration, especially when trying to cut down trees with axes. Using items like the climbing axe feels really weird, and there's a lot of glitches like items falling through the floor, or dynamic objects freaking out by themselves, making it seem like there's something moving in the dark caves when there's nobody there at all. And blueprints that can become glitched and permanently showing up on the screen with no way to remove them. The enemy cannibals feel a bit overwhelming for new players, and I think it would be better if the game offered a mode where cannibals only attacked or even patrolled at night, rather than all day every day. Some of the game's disturbing gore and horror goes a bit too far at times, making me question the mental health of the designer, but the creature designs are excellent, and I wish there were more unique enemies to fight underground. And on top of all that, the game frequently crashes, which can be incredibly frustrating as it relies solely on a manual save function. If the host of a co-op session crashes, there's no way to join back in, which means unless your host likes to save a lot, you likely lost a lot of progress. There should be a way for all users to share the same cooperative save file automatically. That way, one player isn't responsible for keeping the save going. But other than those few issues, The Forest is a surprisingly good game, with a good story hidden deep behind a ton of optional base building gameplay. The game world is dense with resources to use, tools to craft, and structures to build. Enemies are smart and will adapt to your behavior, keeping you constantly looking over your shoulder as you cut down trees, and if you're brave enough, you can venture deep underground to find even more valuable tools and information to help progress the story. Considering the game is only $20, and I've already spent a good 60 plus hours on this game, I totally recommend checking it out. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this posted every week.